In a small village surrounded by fertile farmlands lived a hard-working farmer named Caleb. Caleb's farm was his life's work. He inherited the land from his parents, and with his wife Ruth and 2 sons by his side, he cultivated crops year after year. Their farm was known for its bountiful harvests, and many locals admired Caleb for his skill, dedication, and steady hands. Caleb believed in God, but over time, his faith became something he took for granted, more of a habit than a true reliance on divine power. One year, everything changed. Rain, which always came like clockwork, suddenly stopped. The skies remained cloudless, and the land, once soft and rich, grew hard and brittle. Caleb's crops began to wither under the relentless sun. Days turned to weeks, and weeks into months, but no rain came. At first, Caleb remained optimistic. "The rain will come soon," he said, working tirelessly to save what little he could. But the rain did not come. Ruth suggested they should pray together as a family, but Caleb waved it off. "I've worked this land for years. I know what it needs. I'll find a way." So he pushed harder, trying new methods, digging deeper wells, and even using up all the water stored in their reservoirs. But it wasn't enough. The crops continued to die, and soon they had nothing left to harvest. One evening, as Caleb sat by the cracked soil of his fields, Ruth came to him again. "Caleb, we need to pray. The Lord is watching over us. We need to put our faith in Him." Caleb gave her a tired smile but said, "Faith won't bring rain, Ruth. Hard work will. God gave me this land to tend, and I have to do my part." The drought dragged on. Many farmers abandoned their fields and moved elsewhere. Others took out loans and sold their equipment. Caleb, however, refused to leave. He couldn't bear the thought of walking away from the land his parents had worked on all their lives. As the days grew harder, Caleb's frustration began to show. He became distant, snapping at his children and avoiding Ruth's pleas to pray with the family. Deep down, Caleb felt a growing doubt, not just about his own abilities, but about whether God was listening at all. One day, Caleb's youngest son, Eli, came to him with wide, innocent eyes. "Papa, I prayed for rain today. Do you think God heard me?" Caleb gave him a tired look. "I'm sure he did, son. But some things don't happen just because we ask for them." Eli frowned but nodded, his small heart full of hope that his father seemed to have lost. Weeks passed, and Caleb grew desperate. He sold most of his livestock to buy food for the family and traded his tools to pay off some debts. Yet, despite all his efforts, the drought showed no sign of ending. One evening, as he sat alone by the field, Caleb finally broke. The land was dust beneath his feet, and the weight of his failures felt too much to bear. In a rare moment of honesty, he knelt on the ground and whispered, "God, where are you? I've done everything I can. I've worked harder than ever. I don't know what to do anymore." That night, a strange thing happened. Caleb dreamed of an old man standing at the edge of his field. The man had a gentle face and carried a staff, his presence both comforting and mysterious. The old man looked at Caleb and said, "Why do you labor so hard alone, Caleb? You plow the soil, but you do not ask the one who sends the rain. You carry burdens that were never meant to be yours alone." Caleb woke with a start, sweat on his brow. The words from the dream echoed in his mind, unsettling yet clear. For the first time in a long while, Caleb felt a stirring in his heart, a strange mixture of guilt, humility, and hope. He realized that, while he had been trying to solve everything on his own, he had pushed God to the side. The next morning, Caleb gathered his family around the breakfast table. Ruth looked at him with surprise. He hadn't initiated anything in weeks. Caleb cleared his throat and said, "We're going to pray. As a family." Ruth smiled softly, and their children joined hands. Together, they prayed, not just for rain, but for strength, for patience, and for faith to trust God's plan, even when things seemed impossible. Caleb didn't ask for immediate results. He only asked for the courage to keep believing. In the days that followed, nothing changed at first. The skies remained cloudless, and the heat continued. But something shifted in Caleb's heart. He no longer felt the crushing burden of trying to control everything. Instead, he did what little he could with what he had, and left the rest in God's hands. One evening, as Caleb stood by the field with Ruth, they noticed a gentle breeze picking up. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but different from the scorching winds that had plagued them for months. Ruth tilted her head and smiled. "Do you feel that?" Caleb nodded but said nothing. That night, as they lay in bed, Caleb heard a distant rumble. It was faint, almost like a whisper across the land. He sat up, heart pounding. The sound grew louder, and soon a flash of lightning illuminated the night sky. Moments later, the heavens opened, and rain poured down in torrents, drumming against the roof and soaking the parched earth. Caleb ran outside, laughing like a child. The rain was cold and refreshing, washing away months of dust and despair. Ruth and the children joined him, dancing barefoot in the mud. For the first time in a long while, Caleb felt truly alive, not just because the drought had ended, but because his heart had been renewed. Over the next few days, the fields began to recover. Crops that had withered sprouted new life, and the streams, which had dried to a trickle, flowed once more. Caleb knew that the drought had not ended by chance. It was a reminder, a test of faith that had humbled him and brought him closer to God. From that day on, Caleb's farm flourished, but more importantly, his faith flourished. He worked the land as diligently as ever, but now he did it with a heart full of trust, knowing that he didn't have to carry the burden alone. Years later, when his sons grew older and asked him how he managed to save the farm during the hardest of times, Caleb smiled and said, "I learned a simple truth. Put your faith in God and do not doubt His power. The rain will come when it's meant to. Until then, you trust, you wait, and you never stop believing." Moral of the story: put your faith in God and do not doubt His power.